Happy Halloween, everyone, and welcome to Season 2 of the Horror Corner. This time I want to pivot from talking about multiple titles and talk about one in particular, and that's Warhammer 40,000. This IP goes all the way back to the 80s and is made by a company called Games Workshop. Everything about Warhammer is enormous. Its writing is very baroque and dramatic. It has an incredibly unique high Gothic style that I think is unmatched by any other work of fiction. Not much about it makes sense, and everything within it is so evil, destructive, so absurdly overpowered or just absurd. And that's why it's awesome. You may hear the argument that if you were to unify the forces of any other sci-fi verse and pit it against all of Warhammer, no matter what, Warhammer still wins. Warhammer takes all of the sci-fi concepts you know and puts it on every drug known and unknown to man. Warhammer will fuck you up, and it exists in all forms of media. You can find Warhammer in books, movies, music, video games, and in its first form, tabletop gaming. With a title this vast in both media and lore, rich in decades of history, the question has to be asked, where does one start? As far as picking a format, that's entirely up to you. But there's one thing everyone has to do first, and that's picking your favorite army. And you can do that simply by looking at any depictions of them. There are dozens and dozens of factions within 40K, all with their own stories and aesthetics, and you are bound to like at least one of them. To simplify it, I've broken it down into 3 categories: humans, demons, and aliens. Or in this case, I'll be referring to aliens as Xenos. So my goal here is to introduce the main factions of Warhammer in the shortest amount of time possible. Okay. Starting with ourselves in the 41st millennium, the Imperium of Man. Humanity in 40K is all under one banner, all under one name, and that is the Imperium. Stretching across the Milky Way galaxy, founded and heralded by the God Emperor of mankind, whom everyone is expected to worship. The Emperor is currently in a vegetable state after the wars of the Horus Heresy and is now watching over humanity from the Golden Throne. The Imperium as a whole is extremely xenophobic and radically religious. Remember, good guys in 40K are still evil. Good guys, like the Imperial Guard, the bulwark of humanity's forces. The men and women that fight most of the Imperium's battles are the Imperial Guard. These World War II looking grunts steamroll entire battlefields with hundreds of thousands, millions of troops accompanied by long lines of artillery in land, sea, space, and sky. They take on every fang, tooth, and claw in the universe and die by the thousands for it. It's a known fact in the 40K verse that more guardsmen have died in service of the Emperor than there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. The Guard go through millions of enlistments and casualties daily, with their tactics best described as throwing as many bodies as it takes at the objective and drowning the enemy in firepower. Next up, we have the poster childs of Warhammer, the Emperor's Chosen, the Space Marines, also known as Astartes. Space Marines are what you expect of an elite sci-fi soldier. They're genetically enhanced, have unique organ implants, trained from a young age, have some of the best armor and weaponry the Imperium has to offer, and can still die to the same thing Guardsmen do. Space Marines are this strong on their own because everything else in the universe is just as deadly, or is even more so. That said, Astartes are well known for being exemplary warriors, and as you may have guessed, they're very large, standing at 8 feet tall minimum. In fact, it's been said in 40K that nothing that large should be able to move that quickly. But they're not the strongest nor the fastest the Imperium has to offer. Those would be the Adeptus Custodes. The Custodes are the Emperor's personal bodyguard, handcrafted by the Emperor himself. Whereas most Space Marines were simply men trained to become Astartes, the Custodes were made from start to finish to represent the very zenith of combat prowess. Because they're so expensive and take so long to train, just bearing witness to a Custodian is an honor. Often fighting alongside them are also the Sisters of Silence, essentially female Custodes, but specialize in being a counter to Psychers. And speaking of sisters, it's time now to talk about the Sisters of Battle. These bolter-wielding ladies are an all-female army. Trained from infancy, the Sisters are some of the most radical fighters in all of 40K. Sisters involve martyring themselves as tactics for winning battles. When Sisters arrive on the battlefield, they park their ships in low orbit and baptize the field in holy water while blaring war hymns from their ship's speakers. They literally drop churches as fortifications and love to set their enemies on fire. The Adeptus Mechanicus, or AdMech, are the war cult of Mars. They are the forgers and distributors for pretty much all of the Imperium's weaponry, war machines, vehicles, and munitions. From the most basic lasgun to an Emperor-class Titan, the AdMech meet the supply to the Imperium's demand. They not only love and make machines, but they are also almost entirely machine themselves. They believe in their own god, the machine god they call the Omnissiah, which sounds like heresy, but the Imperium can't complain when the AdMech are the ones that make all their shit. The AdMech love metal and seeing their creations take to the battlefield. Creations such as knights. Knights are skyscraper-sized mechs capable of beautiful destruction. Knights operate in houses, old school style, and swear allegiance to their house. Sporting big guns and chainsaws, these things will meet monsters on the battlefield and are seen as beacons of hope for their allies on the ground. However, they're not the biggest mechs the Imperium has. Oh no. Those would be the Titans. Titans are some of the largest mechanical constructs in all of 40k. The shorter Titan classes, like the Warhound, are a bit taller than Knights, while the largest Titan classes, such as the Emperor class, are literally walking cities. While anyone can be trained to pilot a Knight, Titan pilots are highly specialized. Titan pilots, known as Princeps, are extremely valuable. And in the event a Titan is felled, entire legions of infantry will be sent to recover the Princeps. Princeps can get so in the zone when piloting their Titan, they describe it as addicting. A Princeps forms a psychic bond to their Titan, literally becoming one with it, to the point where what often happens is Princeps will be fused into the cockpits of their Titan and essentially live there as its brain. And of course, the larger the Titan, the more Princeps you need. Titans represent world-ending firepower, and their mere presence can turn the tide of a battle. And that is a very brief summary of the major branches of the Imperium. Each of them has their own number of chapters and regiments, all with their own traditions and stories. There's no end to the amount of aesthetics and history that the Imperium encompasses, and it would be truly impossible to discuss it all in one sitting. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the Imperium's dark side. Before we get into it though, we gotta establish another huge part of the 40k verse, and that is the warp. The warp is a dimension that represents the collective consciousness of everyone in the 40k universe, and is the final resting place for all souls. When you die, you go here. Because there's so much pain and suffering in the 40k verse, that manifests some pretty evil forces within the warp. The forces of chaos. The best way I can summarize the forces of chaos is to talk about the 4 chaos gods, starting with the oldest, Khorne. Khorne is the blood god, the god of rage, war, and slaughter. He's your classic red and black demon god. His forces love to get into melee combat and go face. Despite all the sci-fi weaponry, no matter what, Khorne forces will close the distance. Khorne and his armies just want unending war and slaughter. It's very simple to understand. Next up, we got the Birdman, Tzeentch, the changer of ways, the god of change, sorcery, and fate. Tzeentch is this scheming piece of shit younger brother to Khorne. He loves to bend the rules, lie, and twist reality. You never know what to be sure about when dealing with Tzeentch. He is yes and he is no. Asking him questions only leads to more questions, to the point where you're left questioning what is and isn't. Those who plot, scheme, and lie are drawn to Tzeentch and love to reflect its unpredictable ways. Nurgle, Papa Nurgle, the Plague Lord, the god of death, disease, despair, and decay. Nurgle represents the inevitability of flesh, the fact that we will all wither, die, and rot. The despair that people in 40k feel from that inevitability is partly what feeds Nurgle. Unlike the other gods, Nurgle rewards his followers by granting them more diseases so they can stave off death and continue to carry out his deeds. Immortality under Nurgle is simply one of eternal decay. Now the youngest of the Chaos Gods, Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, loves to feel the pleasures of mortals in all its forms. The simplest feeling of a hug or a kiss, the enjoyment of food and drink, the feeling you get when you experience your favorite weather, or especially the bang bang. Any and all forms of pleasure are what feeds Slaanesh. Slaanesh is seen as any form that's seductive to you, so as to bring you to seek out those pleasures more and more to a state of debauchery. Now, each god has their own legions of chaos demons and chaos space marines, which are just chaos afflicted space marines, as well as chaos cultists of all races, war machines, demon engines of their own craft, including knights and titans, as well as their own starships, their own navy to rival the Imperium. Also all with their own legions, again with their own aesthetics and stories. Chaos forces mostly reside within the warp, but can break into and exist in real space. With how massive the 40K verse is and how much conflict there is in it, it's no wonder all of that gets channeled right into the warp, making the Chaos Gods stronger and only makes things worse. Now, let's round things out and end this and talk about some Xenos. Starting with my personal favorite faction in 40K, the Tyranids, the endless hungering swarm. These bug bastards invade planets by the millions, stripping them of any and all nutritional value, including moisture in the atmosphere, any ores or mineral wealth underground, draining oceans, and the most important, biomass. This includes living things such as plants, animals, you. When Tyranids make planetfall, they are near unstoppable. Every Tyranid story ends with them winning, either by eating everyone on the planet, or they all die themselves, but they cause so much collateral damage their opponents take decades to recover from it. And whatever species they consume after they've done so, they'll take the strengths from their DNA and genetic makeup and add it to themselves, making them stronger. Tyranids take overwhelm tactics to a whole new level by flooding planets with their infantry and freaking kaiju. They're the perfect world-ending organisms, and there are a few other forces that can rival their numbers. One of them is the orcs. Orcs, the green skins, the green tide, are fucking ancient beasts of war, born alongside the Eldar, who I'll talk about in a second. The orcs were born for the sole purpose of waging unending battle. They don't care about their own well-being, they don't need any semblance of morality, they don't care about collateral damage, they just want to get in there and wreck shit. They want to cause the biggest explosions, they want to clobber anything in their way, and they'll do it sporting their favorite colors. No, for real. Orcs are very into colors. They believe that different colors have special attributes that aid them in battle, and this factors into how they function as a species. The more orcs that are together, the stronger their psychic presence becomes, and eventually they'll form something called a Wog. At that point, they can pretty much manifest whatever they believe in. Orcs fight with the power of imagination. The thing is, they are too stupid to realize this. Like, they believe painting the color red over anything will make it go faster, but they don't realize they can just will an enemy tank to spontaneously combust if they all believe it can. Orcs are so random and fun, and they're probably the happiest race in 40K in comparison to their depressed cousins, the Eldar. The Eldar are also very old, but are the literal opposite of the orcs. They wield incredibly advanced technology and weaponry, even in comparison to what the Imperium has, and have some of the most powerful spellcasters in 40K. While always outnumbered, their incredible mobility and psychic power lets them achieve tactics that their opponents can only describe as blinding. The Eldar were once top dog of the universe, but when you're at the top, the only way you can go is down. And that's what happened to the Eldar. Now the Eldar are an endangered species. So the Eldar and orcs are super old, but you know who's even older? The Necrons were kicking around the universe before the orcs and Eldar showed up. Before they were the Terminator-looking dudes they are now, they were once the weak and feeble Necron tier. Their species made a pact with these ancient gods called the Catan, asking them for immortality, which the Catan gave them, but in the process turned them into literal war machines to do their bidding. After making the Necrons fight their wars, the Necrons challenged the Catan, and actually ended up defeating them. The Necrons' tech is so deadly and advanced, their most basic gun can wreck your most advanced tank. A monolith can shoot black holes. Necrons are some of the oldest and most advanced beings in 40K, but some young blood is catching up kind of quickly. The last species I'll be talking about is the Tau, the fish people, the weebs. Not really. The Tau are the youngest race in 40K, and yet have all the technology they need to participate in battles in the 41st millennium. They love guns. Their mechs are big and their guns are bigger. While they don't really have any psychers or spellcasters, that's not really relevant when they probably have 3 times as many missiles as there are opponents they're facing. Tau are pretty innocent at first. They believe in an ideal called the greater good, the belief that all species can work together to achieve one goal that's greater than themselves. They travel from planet to planet, asking other species to join their cause, creating a collective. That sounds pleasant until they encounter a planet that doesn't want to join them. Then they use force. So they're communists. The Tau have impressive firepower, but because they're so young, don't have nearly the amount of combat experience that the other races do, and as a result, can struggle in longer engagements. However, that doesn't mean they're any less dangerous. And that concludes this extremely brief summary of every faction in Warhammer 40,000 and this season's Horror Corner. I glanced over so many aspects of each faction. There are so many subcategories and lore facts for each of them. But there are a lot of videos like this that are much longer and go into even more detail. I just wanted to make this video as a way to dip into Warhammer and possibly introduce some people into this universe that I love so much. I'll be making more videos talking about Warhammer in the future, and what better way to do it than on Halloween. So with that, thanks so much for watching. Happy Halloween, and don't forget, stay spooky.